This is the Internet Court of Truth and Lies. Its purpose is to allow somebody who sees or believes that something is the truth in the media or a lie in the media to bring an analysis of that truth or lie to up to 8 other people to see whether they agree with what he or she believes. We find that the trials are very interesting because they allow you to see how other people think about what you think is the truth or a lie. That's what this whole system is about. The mechanism is called enforced moderated dialogue. So we have a standard set of 8 questions that are set up to concentrate the dialogue on whether or not something's a truth or a lie. They're standard 8 questions. They're never the best questions to ask, but you can always use them to keep dialogue focused on things that are relevant to the question of whether or not something is a truth or a lie. I'm a computational cognitive neuroscientist. This case is about something where I got pretty upset listening to physicists who were famous physicists in one sense or another, claiming that the science of physics was somehow better than anybody else's science. One of the way they did it was they lied about computation. They still do it to this day. They lie about computation, the study of computational cognitive neuroscience. I got finally really mad. So I created this trial. It comes from this statement that's made by one of these physicists that computation is just a series of states. If all we ever had to program was a little Atari or something in the basic programming language, yeah, computation is just a series of states. But to a computation guy, computation is not a series of states. The computation may lead to a series of states. That may be an objective of the computation. But we know that the human brain does not compute like computers do. They are not simply a string of commands executing in series. In fact, the brain is doing parallel computations in the billions. The organizations of these parallel computations are fully in parallel. You can't really list the states that the brain operates in. This argument is that the brain does not compute with a series of states. That is a very restrictive meaning of computation. The brain computes in parallel. It often results in a series of states being achieved by the organism. For example, natural language can be described literally as a series of states, the word spoken. Your movements can be characterized as a series of states, and your brain is organizing these series of states. The brain is not organizing them because it's computing in these series of states. It's computing over an entire domain. In AI, there's something called the state space of a problem, which in the older AI would be some kind of a machine architecture, which was a series of states that was searching a state space that would be a very large state space, but the search would still be one item at a time. But the state space itself would not be, in any realistic sense, a series of states. It was, the state space could be basically a near infinite state space that you traverse through to get to something. That was called human problem solving. That's also not what we consider to be computation that's realistic of how the brain operates. But it does have as a goal what we call hierarchalization or dehierarchalization, which is the ability to sequence a set of states out of what the brain is computing. So the brain knows how to achieve what computers can do. That's one of the reasons that we were able to invent them, but that's not how it computes itself. It turns out how it computes itself is a much more enjoyable thing. There are two videos I put in this article that argued that computation is not a series of states. Computation may yield a series of states, but that's not how it actually works. The one is Sabine Hassenfelder talking about Wolfram. And Stephen Wolfram is a computation guy. He's like me. But she's trying to come to grips with him because he's been doing physics recently over the last 30 or 40 years. He's been trying to get physics to fit within a computational framework. Here is Sabine, who is a PhD in physics, demeaning what Wolfram is doing as a computational person. This is one of the ones that really made me mad.
Just to talk about Stephen Wolfram's theory of everything. I haven't done that because I don't understand what he's doing. But recently I've realized that I don't know what I'm doing either. Indeed, when I look at my news feed, I don't think that anyone knows what they're doing. And so I've decided to just tell you what I think he's doing. Wolfram is a computer scientist and mathematician, probably best known for the math software Mathematica. But he also has the ambition to explain, well, everything. And he wants to do it with computer code. His theory of everything is basically an attempt to put the simulation hypothesis on solid mathematical basis. He's looking for code that'll produce fundamental physics as we know and like it, with gravity and the particle.
Oh, I noticed that what you're seeing here are all networks, like neural networks.
In the standard model. Wolfram is a curious case because he's not your average crank. He understands the mathematics he's using just fine, and yet physicists have paid basically no attention to his ideas. I'm not sure why that is, but I have a guess. His basic idea is that the universe operates like a computer program. It has very simple rules from which the laws of physics emerge, and from those laws, everything else that we see follows. It's a more difficult version of cellular automata, which you see here. That's code which produces two-dimensional patterns line by line. These patterns can become quite complex. So maybe if you did it in 4 dimensions, you could explain the entire universe. That's the idea. I met Wolfram once at a workshop about 10 years ago. He gave a talk about his theory of everything in front of a group of physicists. I describe their reactions as polite skepticism. Like when your aunt goes on about how she's met Elvis Presley in the subway and you're like, oh, interesting. Yeah, it was like that. And I have to admit that I understand the skepticism. The idea that the laws of physics are sort of computation has a rather basic problem. It's incompatible with Einstein's theories of general relativity.
That is not true. That's a lie.
It's not a small mismatch. Any type of computation works in steps. If it does...
There she's saying it. Any kind of computation works in steps. That is not what a computation guy believes.
Then calling it a computation is really just a weird way of talking about laws of physics that we already use. A computation has some sort of update rule, like you see in these cellular automaton calculations. They update step by step, row by row. This...
Again, that's not what we're saying. So she's way off. And she continues
Means
this.
they introduce some increments of time and space. In his 22 book, A New Kind of Science, Wolfram says he wants to describe space as a network. Mathematicians also call them graphs. Both of these terms, networks and graphs, refer to the same thing. That's dots connected by lines.
So I'm not going to continue this, but
Robert, she goes on to explain precisely why she objects to the system, which is that relativity is not compatible. The steps change depending on your relative motion and gravitational quotient and all that kind of stuff. She goes on to explain why that system doesn't work. She's not just saying that steps are not working, just saying as far as relativity is concerned, doing this kind of graphical separation of points that changes for an observer. That's all she's saying.
yeah, I would refer you to Wolfram on that one.
I've read Wolfram, or some of it.
So his argument is she's basically misunderstanding what he's doing. He's literally doing computation that's massively parallel. You can imagine that there's a state to the universe, but there's never really a state to the universe. It's the same kind of massive parallelism in the brain. It's just silly to stop everything and say, well, let's record that state, stop everything in a second, let's record that state, let's record this state, and then try to program something to get to those states. That is not computation. Computation can do that. That's one way computation can work, but that's not what we mean when we say computation.
I agree. I think Sabine agrees.
Except she defines computation as a series of states. That's what.
All right.
Okay. That,
all right. That
really hit the roof. Okay. So just to be clear, the other one that I want to show is later in this article. Here's one of the most famous physicists also confusing computation as a series of states. So this is
in the case of the area of the black hole, it comes to thermal equilibrium quickly. It was the entropy of the black hole. Something else continues to grow for a very long time. We've known that just from Einstein's field equations. What is that thing?
Now, where I'm going to go with this is that he's actually thinking like a computation guy thinks, but they're discovering what they call complexity. When they're discovering this thing called complexity, and it's complexity and entropy and information complexity, they are discovering the same thing that we see in the human brain. And they think that they're the ones who discovered it. Yet they are just now, recently in physics, coming to grips with what they see as complexity, which they also call microstates, which can never be followed explicitly. And now you're talking computation, and they continue to just have it wrong.
The only known thing that continues to grow long after a thing comes to thermal equilibrium is what's called complexity, quantum computational complexity. And that takes a huge amount of time, exponentially long for it to settle down. So I guess I put forward the idea that this long time growth of the interior of the black hole, which can't be seen from the outside, that long time growth was the growth of quantum computational complexity. And quantum computational complexity is a very subtle quantity. It's a quantity that quantum computer scientists know about. It was a property that I don't think any, except for one or two people that I knew, had ever even thought about or even heard about.
That's correct too.
I can tell you in a minute what complexity means, but this was not part of the theoretical physicist's tools.
There you go.
Yeah, I agree. He's completely wrong about that.
This is what I'm trying to say is computation is not a series of steps to regard it just simply as a series of steps is like all you've ever got is an Atari that you can program in BASIC. That's somehow that's going to tell you how the universe works. The answer is it's not. You
I
have
won't
to
hear anything said about BASIC.
I love BASIC, but it is absolutely serial.
Yeah,
yeah.
it is.
So I have to come up with something that was old time what computers were. That's my argument. And what's really interesting is what happens in achieving the series of states that we can observe. What's going on in the brain before that to achieve the hierarchicalization that's required to sequence things, or the dehierarchicalization that basically desequences things into the language of the brain itself, which is the predication structures. That's the thing where I would like to see this go, and where I would like the physicists to understand what we're actually doing that they haven't yet fully appreciated. I'm going to do is go through my verdicts on it. It's a common misconception that computation means defining a series of states. This is not at all correct in computational cognitive neuroscience. So when we were talking about perceptrons, for example, that sounds like a series of states. You have to take the weighted sum of all the inputs and it has an output. What's not said is that all those perceptrons exist in their own time space. There is no clock that clocks all the perceptrons going off in exactly this first, do the first one, do the second one, do the third one. Nothing like that is going on inside the brain. That just doesn't happen. All these things are operating, and so there's no way you could say that the computation that goes on in the brain is a series of states. It just doesn't work that way. That's my argument. I believe that it's a lie that computation is a series of states. Computation people, Wolfram is one of them. The physicists discovering that they might want to come up with this term microstates is, yes, we're already there and ahead of you, sir. That's the way I view it. I'm sorry, this is one that I'm emotionally attached to. So is it the truth? This is a common mistake made by physicists. They think they know how humans think. By the way, when they describe how they think humans think, they think of it as a computation, as a series of states. They're all over the place wrong. Is it the whole truth? I said no. The result of brain computation can be a series of states, but the computation itself never is. Is it nothing but the truth? I said yes. Got nobody who agrees with me, but that's okay. What's the deceit? I say that the deceit is that the lie is factually true, and I actually believe that. Is the deceit or truth intended? I think that the physicists and others that believe this lie just think it is true. I believe they will never be convinced it's a lie because they do not understand cognitive science and will give no credibility to cognitive science as a science. They'll always think that physics is the only true science. What is the motivation behind the truth or lie? The motivation is to persuade you that hate someone or something, namely us. What's the social acceptability of the truth or a lie? It's not acceptable for other scientists not to recognize sciences other than the science that they do. What label would improve the social acceptability of the truth or lie? I just said this is factually untrue. And for this case, this is one of the few ones that I got emotionally involved with, because I've lived this all my life of these people putting computation people into a little tiny bucket and throwing the bucket out the back door, when we were never like that. So that's what my verdicts are. I'll go through the jurors and get 20 or 30 seconds on your verdicts, and I would love to hear it. Particularly, I don't know if what I'm saying doesn't make any sense or does or whatever. I'd love to hear what people think. Juror one.
Greetings, everyone. Okay, this I think this case, first of all, is not similar to any of the cases I've been on. So it was quite a lot. I had to do a bit of looking to some Googling. For me, I'll just say that based on what I've read through, that the brain doesn't really think step by step the way a computer would. I hope I didn't miss what the topic was about. It processes like many signals at once, and then later on do we experience the results as a clear thought or decision. So calling computation a series of states falls misleading if we're talking about how thinking actually happens. But in an everyday life, we experience our thoughts as if they happen in steps. So obviously, first you would know something, then think about it, and then react. So describing computation as states isn't completely wrong, but it's just describing the outcome, not the real process underneath that happens. So for instance, I mean, if you can imagine you crossing the road and then a car suddenly speeds towards you, you don't think step one, I should detect the car, then step two, I should calculate the speed, or step three, I should decide to move. You just jump back, and then all the senses, judging and fear and the movement happen at once. Only afterward, when someone actually asks you to explain the steps, then those steps weren't really thinking, they were your explanation of it. The steps, when you explain it to someone else, it would sound like the states of it. So from my understanding, I would say that computation in the brain isn't truly a series of states, that just that a description is more about how we talk about thinking, not how thinking actually works. But after what everyone has said, even on the chat box, I was just listening, and I feel okay, Mr. Robert did use some words that did show that he was emotionally invested on the topic. About, I think one of them, you were like, I've become so mad about it. And also I did see with other jurors just mentioning that defining the terms is also quite like important, not just how you use it and the context and the intention of it. Because when you showed the video of the athlete, it was a matter of, was the intent to deceive? So then it would define if they are lying to us or not. But yeah, thank you. It's quite an interesting case. Yeah.
Juror two.
That's me, Bob. Yeah, I liked Juror one's explanation. But yeah, I think you wrote your dissertation in 1976, so that's 50 years ago.
Yeah.
So I can understand your emotional attachment to this. But yeah, I've also actually posed the question, why would physicists lie? Why would they want to lie? That's the first thing I would. And
so I think what it is that they think that other people are not doing what they're doing, and they're not scientists. So it's
is that general consensus?
Oh, you're not one of us. Okay. And so you couldn't possibly be doing what one of us is doing. Okay. And we
But that's a sweeping generalization, Bob. That's a sweeping generalization.
I know it is. But I've always been a computational since probably 1969 or so. Computational, cognitive neuroscientist. My whole thing has been, how does the brain compute? My mind was open. I believe that computers gave you a kind of a model of how they could compute, how brains could compute, because people were able to program computers. Okay, yes. So human brains know how to compute like computers. Okay, that's true. But whether or not I believe that the human brain computes like computers in general, the answer was no.
Okay.
So my job was to figure out how it actually does compute. And that took many years of study. And most of the insights I've gotten that I regard as good scientific insights that I've got on how brains compute is by oddly studying natural language. It starts telling you the story of how the brain computes.
Bob, if I can I might be oversimplifying this, but say if I took Jura 1's explanation about crossing a road and seeing if there's a vehicle coming and the brain is now computing, can I use the analogy then, taking all those different inputs, how far the vehicle is, how wide the road is, what's the lighting? Could it be like a race, right? Where you've got however
Yes.
many, they're all running on the track
Yes.
at different
Yeah.
speeds.
So this is
So they're going to the result is that at different times they're all going to complete at different speeds and they're going to complete the race at different times.
right.
So it's kind of natural selection.
Or is it a relay? Or is it a relay?
It's not really a relay.
Are they saying
but
it's a relay?
Yeah, it can have relay components, but what's really going on, you caught it when you said it's a race. So life is a race with time. Your ability to respond to what is true in reality quickly, your life depends upon it always. Not in every particular circumstance, but generally speaking, that's what neurons do, is they provide the animal with a way to respond to the truth of reality that can be intuited, but it's always a race, because if you don't respond in time, you're dead. If you want to get into what the real computation model is, it's this race model, racing a billion things racing against each other to reach the point where you take an action, and then when you take an action, to execute that action, okay, which is a race to execute the action as well. Calling these race conditions is a very good thing to call them, in my mind.
Because of the speed of the reaction, of course, what the brain is dealing with is hypotheticals.
Yes.
Because it's actually, it's responding without the actual information, just the assumption.
But it's responding with a heck of a lot more information than we normally could ever program. So if you tried to program what the brain was doing as a series of states, you just wouldn't be able to do it. There's just too much it's doing in parallel. But what it's doing is intuiting things. It's finding things that become true that will either cause it to do something or know that it has actually done something. That kind of computation can be done in computer hardware, which is what we do with ChatGPT and stuff like this. And those things are basically linear algebra, but that's what they are. So they're computing values, but the values are, if they have some limited precision, like 16 bits or something, doesn't really matter. Turns out it doesn't really matter. But the values they're computing are essentially continuous underlying value, or potentially continuous values that are all competing against each other, not directly competing. They're all fundamentally competing to save the organism. The winners, if they're right, will save the organism. That's what's really going on. And so understanding that computation turns out to be the real thing. If you look at natural language, you'll see that most of the words, vast majority of the words we use that are not just nouns, are words that are associated with intuitions and not absolute truth. But anyway.
And conditionals.
And conditionals, absolutely conditionals. And we can do it. We can do computation in the traditional sense. And we can do proofs and all these other things, which is real. But that's not the computation that goes on all the time that underlies our ability to do proofs. Our ability to do proofs and stuff are the results of such computations that are not proof type computations. They're intuitions. Juror 3.
Oh, that's me. I'll compress my 40 minutes reply into 40 seconds. I think all we're dealing with here, I believe, is a matter of definitions. For example, my introduction to computing at university was being introduced to this vast analog computer that they were very proud of in the university. Yeah. And it's computing, but it's continuous input gives continuous output. We don't, and this whole idea of chopping everything up into discrete states, it aids a specific kind of viewpoint, but it's all computing.
Yep.
It's all computation. The brain is computing, but it's just not computing in bits, binary language or anything like that.
Yep.
So the analogs. So I just think we're quibbling over a definition here. the brain,
I think if I hadn't been so upset by what that physicist, the first one, was saying.
Oh, Sabine, yeah.
Sabine. I think she would be Sabina, right? Or which is she?
Yeah, I'm not quite. Yeah,
I'm pretty sure my German says Sabina.
Sabina, maybe. Yeah, it ends in an E. So I don't know. But anyway, I think she goes on to say, because I think Wolfram is. I'm speaking here now with my hat on. I'm a member of the Information Physics Institute, and I'm telling you that this whole idea about what underlies physics is computation, that the universe is a computational thing and can be understood in terms of the software computing and out of which come the laws of physics. I don't really agree with that. I think that's wrong, but it's just because it's a new thing, it's a new angle.
He's going to do. The reason I like him is whatever he does, if he gets anywhere with that, with what he's doing, it's going to be interesting because he is a computation guy. And it'll be interesting to see what he gets, if he gets anything out of that.
Yeah.
Right now, I've seen anything that I like that he's taking that approach. So for the people who on the call don't really understand what he's doing, he's dividing the universe into a space of 2 to the 100th power by 2 to the 100th power by 2 to the 100th power for space. In Einsteinian space. So what you do is you divide space up into smaller units than can ever be measured. And you divide time into smaller units than can ever be measured. And then put simple rule systems into that space. You should be able to have a mass of an object move through space because of momentum, for example. And you should be able to observe that by these very simple low-level rules operating in a much finer version of space than we could ever measure. So a Planck, the Planck limit, which is basically 10 to the minus 33 power, 1 over 10 to the 33. His Wolfram space is 1 divided by 2 to the 100th power, not to the 33rd power. So he's operating in this much finer space. And if he gets something out of it, that'll be interesting.
But it's only ever going to be an algorithm.
It'll be a version of an algorithm, but it will run as a model. It will run as a model.
Yeah. Well.
And now he's doing exactly what I do, what we did, they got to GPT and all these other things. We understand that we're not going to ever understand the brain mathematically. We will only understand it as a model, as something that we can model. Okay. Wolfram's doing that. So he's doing the right thing. He's a brilliant guy. Okay. And so it'll be really interesting to see if he ever gets anywhere with it. I just don't know.
Just one other point I wanted to make was I don't think it's incumbent on scientists to understand everybody's field.
Right.
Is it? You seem to suggest that they need to understand you.
Yeah. So I normally am very tolerant, but when she said that computation is just a series of states, I hit the roof. That was just like, I don't know why. I so reject it.
The psychologist in you must tell you that's a state of mind.
Right. It's a sad thing that I have become. So are we on juror 4 now?
Yes, we're on juror 4. That's me. Okay, now I'm going to be on a peacekeeping mission here between you and the physicists, Robert. I want to point out, first of all, that it's not at all unusual for scientists and academics to disagree hotly.
Yeah.
Okay. I believe that these physicists believe what they're saying, so I don't think it's fair to say that they're lying. I think they are trying to inform. I don't think they're trying to deceive. Now, to understand what's going on here. It's been a little bit difficult for me. The way I pictured it in my mind was that you're saying that when the way the brain works is not like lighting a long fuse and going slowly, like passing through this, that, the other, and finally, bang, arriving at its conclusion. I think you're saying that it's more like a row of rockets all explode at the same time. Is that kind of what you're saying? This is the only way I can conceive of this.
It's hierarchicalization and dehierarchicalization. So that's what the brain is computing. Is another way to put it is, for one book that the brain may write, I mean, the book in English, I don't know, Alice in Wonderland, okay, story, the brain actually computes 1 million books or 5 million books and selects out of those books hierarchicalizations of the information in those books that can fit in a certain time frame.
Oh, goodness, I'm a writer. I haven't found that to be true of me.
What we argue is that it is true of your brain, you're just unconscious of it. So we believe
definitely that, yes.
we believe that Freud was right, that most of what your brain actually computes is completely unconscious, but it affects what you say. But we believe that Freud vastly underestimated, given this, what we can observe, vastly underestimated the amount of computation the brain does to arrive at any word that it says when it says it.
Okay, can I just say that there is a case that I know of that does seem to be possibly have something to do with what you're saying. I know a person who is autistic and who is extraordinarily good at mathematics. He doesn't seem to arrive at his answers through any series of states. He is now a math teacher at university. He looks at a problem and he writes down the answer. Yep. He cannot explain in any way how he got there. He is now a teacher at a university. He is the worst teacher on earth.
Absolutely.
Because he has no idea how he does it.
Yep.
And he seems to be someone who doesn't really go through a series of states. He's perhaps he's neurologically, he is neurologically divergent. So maybe the sort of serial output part of the thing, his brain just doesn't work at. It just doesn't work.
Yeah, his communications. So the brain is a very complicated thing. I've known people like this guy. I used to always have 2 physicists and 2 mathematicians working for me full time. I did that for years. Always had 2 really good physicists and 2 really good mathematicians who did whatever I said to do. Okay. So I learned 2 things. One was the mathematicians hated the physicists and the physicists hated the mathematicians.
Okay, that's back to my thoughts about academics in general.
Yeah,
that's normal.
Yeah, that's normal. The other thing was that I would sit down with the mathematicians. A similar thing would happen with the physicists, but different. But I'd sit down with the mathematicians and they would show me some math that they had just worked out on solving some problem and that we were trying to solve to build some device. What I'd do is I'd sit down and I would spend 2 or 3 hours with them. They worked for me. They had to answer the questions. So I'd spend 2 or 3 hours understanding what it took them 20 or 30 seconds to do. That's one of the more enjoyable experiences I've ever had in my life, which was to sit down with one of those people who just couldn't talk, but to force them to explain by guiding what they had to answer. So I would understand the steps that they were taking. And of course, what was really going on was they were taking 20 steps when I only saw 1. More confirmation of the brain doing a lot more computation than you think it is. But I've known people like that too. And they do make absolutely the worst teachers.
Oh, the absolute worst. And he gets extremely angry at other people for not being able to do that.
Yeah. And such people should work for people
if you
like
say,
me,
why is it that, or how did you get to that? He just says, it's obvious, and goes into a rage.
Yeah, I know.
Now, what about this? Could it not be that the brain is firing simultaneously a whole series of mini serial calculations?
So yes, so that's true and not true. So what it's doing is firing simultaneously a whole set, suppose a series, a whole set of hierarchicalizations that could be
Many series of states?
of hierarchicalizations that could be linearized as a sequence of states.
Could there not be micro series of states?
So the right answer is that if you get
simultaneously fired off, I'm CC, so that
right,
you could.
but the problem is,
right?
how do you put a clock on that? And
We
the
don't
answer
have
is,
such a fine instrument. I agree that. I agree we don't have such a fine instrument, but that doesn't make it untrue, though, does it?
Does not make it untrue. It's true. It does not make it untrue that you cannot, essentially using integral calculus, find at some point in time all of these functions in terms of the first, second derivatives of the absolute value of all these functions. And then you can say, here's microsecond 1, here's microsecond 2, and then plot the structure of all those things, and they'll all come out as a series of states. But that's not what the brain is actually doing. The brain is actually, its objective is to essentially understand what's going on in the sense of being able to know what to do about it. And that can happen at any moment precisely because the brain is computing all these alternatives, and one can pop up and says, I got to answer this person.
Okay.
Yeah. Juror, I'm getting lost. I'm so much sorry.
It's me.
Okay.
First question is, why am I always juror number 5?
I'm
so always juror number 5.
We have it in your keyboard. We've gotten into your keyboard, my friends at the NSA.
Again?
Yes. Your keyboard has
at
least 3 or 4
4
computers in it. Yeah.
You guys are going to see some weird stuff, man. Anyway. All right. So if you look at my juror number is not 5. My juror number is 6 times 5 open paren 3 minus 2 close paren divided by 6. Now, to reach 5, you have to perform computation.
Yes.
Discrete computation.
Yeah, there is such a thing. If she had said discrete computation, I wouldn't have gotten mad.
Yeah, it's not. Oh, God, how do I put this? Okay, the question between discrete and indecipherable is one of technology. Do we have a strong enough microscope? That's the only question.
So I think it's different. I think that the science, we do understand hierarchicalization and dehierarchicalization. Okay. We see it. We can observe it directly in language. That's new. We also understand what a predication is, and that's new. But we're a long way for seeing how we can model them and get them to do these things. Like ChatGPT, we can model and they do these things, transformer models and so forth. But there's a lot to discover about how these large scale, very complex systems actually control themselves.
Yeah, I'm right there with you.
And that's the part that I think is wide open for, in 15 or 20 years, there will be people that will have cracked that one open better than we. There's a whole bunch of discoveries that remain to be seen.
Absolutely. I would suggest that computation, especially cranial, I'm going to use cranial computation, could be parallel while you're mandated to have a serial output.
Yeah, that's basically the truth. That's basically what hierarchicalization is all about. Yep.
Yeah. But that, and there's an image in the chat that I pasted in there with regard to purity in mathematics. It's towards the bottom. It's funny, or purity of science.
Okay.
And I think that'll help to explain some of the hatred between mathematicians and physicists. Go enjoy. Have fun. Good one. We'll talk later. Bye.
Okay, juror 6.
Okay, I think everybody gave me a full understanding of what you're talking about. And the cases you're arguing, physicists sometimes pretend to understand how the human brain thinks without accounting for the complex parallel nature of biological processing. Essentially, the critique is that some physicists are oversimplifying a field outside of their own expertise. So that may be and annoying.
So it's like me reducing physicists to Galileo.
Yes, okay.
And he was a great guy, but he certainly didn't know what an atom was. Sorry. Anyways, juror 7.
That's me. Can you hear me okay?
Yep.
Okay, so I thought at one point during the trial I had it figured out 100%, but then we had all this other stuff come in, and then I looked it up on Copilot, which I've attached in the report, but I just have to piggyback off of what Teresa said and go with what she said, and that's my final answer for 1,000, Alex.
Sounds good. Juror 8.
Hi, everyone. Firstly, I do agree with you, Robert, by saying that's not a series of steps like what you once said, because I do believe that the brain is more complex than what we think, and that it's more based on, if it was a series of steps, then humans really wouldn't have instinct or intuition that plays a part in these roles. We wouldn't actually be able to have the flight or fight response. If it's a series of steps, we would know, okay, I'm scared now, I can activate the adrenaline. So that's what I have my understanding from what your case is about. And with the physicist part, I can say that they more think of the logical spectrum, where if conjugate science was actually the proper science, then you would understand beyond the logic point. You wouldn't see it as logic, but beyond it to understand the brain, because the brain is so complex. That's all I have to say. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you. So this
That's
sounds
exactly
good.
what a brain would say.
Yeah. We know what a brain will say. You can, when you speak English, you're hearing it.
Yeah.
We actually know what brains say. Literally.
I would love to talk
It's
to.
observationally true.
No, because it's all just done on report. It's just on the opinion. You have to ask someone, and they tell you. No, it's not saying we don't know what's going on inside.
Oh yeah. So this sounds good. Next week I hope to have one that I'm not so emotionally bound up into. And I apologize. At one point I said I would never do this as a trial, and then I got myself upset again and did it as a trial.
Passion is fine. You should be passionate about things.
But did the therapy work though, Robert?
So yeah, the therapy worked a little bit. What I was actually thinking a second ago when you were talking was, I was saying we should have had a physicist on this as a juror here. I actually, after Sabine did that video, I wrote her and said the reply is there. I don't know if she can still read it, but it said essentially what I just said. And of course, she never responded to it.
You know, if we had a physicist on, we could all burn him at the stake.
Burn him at the stake. Talk about the idiot physicists who tried to give us bad grades when in fact they were bad teachers.
I'm gonna have to look up an image for that for truth for
I have to say, in support of physicists, the best teacher I ever had was the one who taught me physics. He was just great. Yeah.
I had one physicist teacher who was insanely good, and he taught me basically everything I know about electronics.
Oh.
It was amazing. And I've been able to build hardware ever since. I've been able to do chips and do all these other things, and because of him.
Yeah,
he was a physicist. Anyway, so we'll see each other next week.
Bye, Bob. Bye, y'all.
Bye.
All right. Bye, everybody.
Bye.
Bye.